A rocket failure at the edge of space should have ended this story in seconds. Instead, it turned into a survival ordeal that lasted far longer than the launch itself. The rocket climbed normally through the sky. Fire trailed beneath it. The ground fell away. Inside the Soyuz spacecraft, 2 Soviet cosmonauts were following a routine path toward orbit.
Staging confirmed.
Everything about the flight depended on sequence. One stage finished its job.
Trajectory unstable.
Another stage took over. The machine shed weight and continued climbing. For a few minutes, that sequence held. Then it broke. High above the Earth, during a critical staging event, something failed. Parts of the launch vehicle did not separate as intended. Instead of becoming lighter and more stable, the rocket began experiencing forces it was never supposed to encounter. The mission was no longer progressing toward orbit. The vehicle carrying the crew was becoming a threat to them. From inside the spacecraft, there was little the cosmonauts could do. The failure was unfolding far beyond human reaction time. Control was already disappearing. Then, the emergency system activated. The Soyuz spacecraft had been designed for moments exactly like this. If the rocket became dangerous, the crew would be pulled away from it. The mission would end, but the crew might live. In an instant, the spacecraft separated from the failing launch vehicle. The crew was thrown into crushing acceleration. Their bodies endured forces that reached roughly 21 times normal gravity. Every part of the abort system was being pushed to perform perfectly. The rocket had failed. The rescue system had not. For a moment, the story appears to end there. The capsule remains intact. The crew is alive. The escape system has done exactly what it was built to do. Beneath them, clouds and landscape drift past as the spacecraft begins its descent back toward Earth. The danger seems to be behind them. But the capsule is still falling. And nobody has chosen where it will land. The spacecraft that began this journey as a vehicle for reaching orbit has become something else entirely. It is now an emergency escape pod descending toward an unknown destination. The parachute deploys. Its white canopy spreads against the sky. From a distance, it looks like the final image of a successful rescue. The crew has survived the rocket failure. The capsule is descending safely. The system worked. Yet the ground below is not a runway. It is not a recovery zone. It is not a location selected by planners months before launch. Mountain terrain begins to emerge beneath the descending spacecraft. Snow. Rock. Steep slopes. The crew is no longer deciding anything about their future path. Gravity is making every remaining decision for them. The capsule continues downward. Then it lands. And the meaning of survival changes again. The impact does not place the spacecraft in an open field. It comes to rest on a snowy mountainside. The slope is steep. The terrain is unstable. The surrounding environment is hostile. The rocket failure is over. A different survival problem has begun. The capsule that was once a spacecraft becomes a shelter. Outside, the mountain dominates everything. Snow covers the terrain. The slope drops away below them. Movement is difficult. Self-rescue is uncertain. Landing was supposed to be the end of the emergency. Instead, landing has created a second disaster. The parachute, which moments earlier represented survival, now creates another complication. The canopy and its lines remain connected to the spacecraft. On level ground, that would be an inconvenience. On a mountainside, it becomes something else. The parachute can catch wind. The terrain can shift. The capsule is no longer simply resting on the mountain. It is hanging in a place where stability cannot be taken for granted. The crew has escaped the rocket. They have escaped the descent. But they cannot escape the mountain. Another option disappears.
The stabilization gear immediately.
Waiting becomes the only practical choice.
Watch the ice. Move carefully.
Time passes differently in situations like this. Minutes are no longer empty. They carry pressure. The environment continues working against the stranded crew, whether they move or remain still. Cold remains cold. Terrain remains dangerous. Isolation remains isolation. The mountain does not care that the launch emergency has already happened. For the cosmonauts, survival is now measured in endurance rather than acceleration. Earlier, the threat arrived in seconds. Now it arrives 1 hour at a time. Far away, recovery forces begin moving toward the landing site. Yet reaching the crew is not simple. The location itself is the problem. The capsule sits where it was never intended to be. Every stage of the story has removed another layer of control. The rocket failed. The abort became automatic. The landing location became uncontrollable. Mobility disappeared. Now the crew depends entirely on people who are still making their way through difficult terrain. The shrinking options that began in the sky have followed them all the way to the mountainside. And still the capsule remains at the center of everything. First it was a spacecraft. Then it was an escape pod. Then it was an uncontrolled projectile falling beneath a parachute. Now it is a shelter waiting to be found. Eventually, recovery teams close in on the location. The mountain that isolated the crew also makes extraction difficult. Reaching the spacecraft is its own operation. The rescuers are not simply collecting passengers from a completed landing. They are rescuing the result of a successful rescue. The distinction matters. Because the deeper reality of this story is that the launch failure was never the whole event. The launch failure was only the doorway. When recovery forces finally reach the stranded capsule, the final remaining path to safety succeeds. The crew is extracted from the mountainside and brought out alive. Only then does the long chain of disappearing options finally stop. The image that remains is not the rocket climbing towards space. It is the capsule resting on a snowy slope. At the beginning of the story, that capsule represented control. It was carrying 2 men toward orbit. Later, it represented survival. Then, uncertainty. Then, entrapment. And finally, a target waiting to be rescued. A rocket failure should have killed the crew. Instead, the safety system worked. That is the contradiction at the heart of the entire event. The system saved their lives exactly as intended. It simply delivered them into a different battle. The true story of Soyuz 18A did not begin when the rocket failed. It began after the rescue succeeded.